Carbohydrates. When I was growing up, there was a food pyramid, and it had all the starchy foods on the bottom of the pyramid. And all these very rich carbohydrate foods were supposed to make up the foundation of your meals to make this so-called healthy meal. Of course, we know that the lobbyists had a large factor in the determination of the final outcome of those food pyramids. And we also know through more objective research that it is pretty much upside down. The food pyramid is inverted in terms of what it was in the day. And so what we need now is to be aware that starchy carbohydrates are going to be something that you'd want to minimize, if not completely eliminate, if possible. Now, when I say that, though, every body type is different. And so some people can literally extract and produce the glucose they need from the proteins and fats that they receive in their food, while other people just cannot produce enough. They just don't have the ability for some other reason. And so they may need as much as 25 to 35% of their diet to be made up of these carbs from starchy foods. But if you have to do that, and there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, don't do it. Just don't do any carbs." With all due respect, though, everybody's not the same. And I wish it was true that you didn't have to use it. But I know people firsthand. I've seen their blood work. I've seen this, and it's really not good. They do not function well on low to no carbs. And so, and these people have gone through the transition to allow their body to have that ability to run off of their fats, and they still can't produce enough glucose. So their body kind of goes into shock for a while, and they just don't function. And what happens here is that if you do have to have some source of carbohydrates, because that's just the type of body you have, go with the cleanest, lowest glycemic index types of foods, like potatoes, like white potatoes in particular, and rice. You may say, well, what's wrong with sweet potatoes? There's a lot more probably nutrient density. It is true, but it has a lot more sugar. I mean, tremendous amounts of sugar in that compared to white potatoes. So you would have to try to find the cleanest sources of these starchy foods. Now, why, once again, would you limit or even eliminate carbs from your diets, just like simple sugars? Because it is a source of inflammation. In fact, it is the main source of inflammation in the body tissues, which is essential for disease states. You can't really have a disease unless you have inflammation. So in a nutshell, a low carb or a no carb diet, and I mean a lifestyle of eating, not just a fad diet, will lend in combination with eating raw food, especially like vegetables, meats, seafood, seasonings, fats, beverages, eggs, and dairy like cheese, all those low to almost no carb at all types of foods, to a very healthy lifestyle. In fact, research shows that this is the closest that we can get to an actual fountain of youth, is by eating this way. Low to no carbs and eating whole foods, not grains, but whole foods in their raw state or closest to it. And those foods that I just mentioned will get you the furthest in life, and allowing you to be who you really are. Now, you also want to incorporate, besides the foods, the whole function of intermittent fasting and calorie restriction. I have videos on this. Feel free to do a keyword search to find those. Just remember, your body can become efficient in burning fat and protein in the foods you eat into glucose for energy if you transition out of a carbohydrate-rich diet. And so your body can do it. And your body's actually meant to be a lot more geared toward burning fat in particular than high starchy carbs. If you go to any kind of more primitive culture, they typically eat about one meal a day, to be totally honest with you, one meal a day, and they burn fat as their main fuel source in their body. Okay? Unlike Americans and most Europeans that I know, we burn carbs. That's all we burn, which is full of inflammation properties. And so what we have here is that we're burning the wrong fuel source. And and this is going to be an ongoing problem until we fix it, because we are overeating, for one, as a culture, especially here in these so-called first world countries. We overeat, and we eat the wrong foods, number two. And lastly, our focus on what is healthy is completely distorted. We think that we get some type of quote unquote health food, which is actually processed or something at this health food store, and we think that we're doing so well when in fact it isn't doing much for us, if any at all, and it probably is hurting us. And so we have to just go back to the foundations of what real food is. And so if we look at more primitive cultures and how they look so young and so fit and they're so much more healthy and they don't have all of these disease states because they're not putting all these carbs in their body. They're not using that as their primary means of fuel. And so we could take a lot from them, learn a lot, in fact, about how we can go back to our origins and live a much healthier lifestyle. Thanks for watching.